All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for watching this. So I am here with one of our amazing clients, Darrian, and talked to her last week in one of her sessions, and she was so interested in sharing her story. And I know so many women out there struggle just like she did, whether it's with endometriosis or whether it's any other, hormonal imbalance or woman's condition. And she was at a point in her journey where she's really compelled to, talk more about her experience and what she went through, and an effort to really help other women going through a lot of the same things. So I really appreciate you, Darrian, for being willing to share your story, because I think a lot of women sometimes live in the closet, so to speak, when it comes to their health conditions, because they either don't have people around them that understand, that think it's a problem, and so they oftentimes kind of suffer in silence, thinking that that's just the normal thing. So we appreciate you being here and sharing all of this with us.
Yeah,
So
I'm
what I
super
thought
excited to
we
be
could
here.
start with, yeah, great. So what I thought we could start with is just kind of sharing, your journey a little bit, like what symptoms you were experiencing, when did it start, and kind of what was your journey to getting diagnosed, what solutions were you being offered?
Yeah, so it started when my symptoms developed or they got worse as I was exploring different hormonal birth control. And I was trying a few different things and started getting some very strange symptoms. I was experiencing pelvic pain, bloating, um, and different types of pain and urgency with urination, and just a mixed bag of things where I had to see different doctors for different issues. And I could never really get a clear answer from anybody. Um, because a lot of my results or discussions would end with things seem perfectly fine, you seem perfectly normal. And I knew that something was wrong because I had definitely experienced a change a few years ago. So I had generally not had these symptoms, had not had painful periods, had not had random pelvic pain. And then I experienced a little bit of a shift in looking for different types of birth control, IUDs. Um, and so that really kind of led me to look at what was happening on my own. I wanted to look at my symptoms as a whole. And I really felt like as I was looking with each individual doctor, there was really not a holistic look at all of my symptoms. They really just wanted to focus on one area. So that caused me to want to look and research more about the symptoms that I was having. And I felt that I kind of self diagnosed myself with endometriosis much later. It took a really long time. But I knew that I wasn't really getting the answers that I needed from the doctors who were focused, on each specific area. So I had a doctor, a nurse practitioner that I was seeing that unfortunately never mentioned endometriosis to me. She recommended that I see other doctors. She did not want to explore my issues. And so that led to prolonged pain, prolonged symptoms, and then eventually what drove me to a place of kind of leaving that doctor and striking out on my own to look at my symptoms in a different way.
Yeah. So pretty much the doctors that you went to either weren't really doing anything and just said everything was fine, or what kinds of things, like what kind of tool are you using to kind of try to figure out what was wrong, or were they even?
Yeah, I would have exams I had ultrasounds. I would have, depending on the issue, different things, seeing if my bladder was emptying, because I was just having all kinds of strange pelvic symptoms. So I was going to any urologist or doctor to understand, what are these new symptoms. So they would run kind of, I would probably describe them, I guess, as basic tests, or we would have really surface level discussions. And then I would leave without answers, or being told that my symptoms perhaps were not as intense or as life altering, because they may be viewed as mild. Like the pelvic pain was viewed as happening here and there. Therefore, probably didn't seem serious, which was really hard for me because the pelvic pain was new or had increased in intensity, but wasn't necessarily debilitating yet. So I felt
Mm-hmm.
like, my symptoms weren't viewed as intense enough to be explored further beyond the basic level tests. I
Mm-hmm.
was told that my IUD was had possibly created an internal infection, like a vaginal infection. And so I had a few ultrasounds for that, but everything looked normal. And I was given a few rounds of antibiotics to treat an infection that I didn't have a lot of symptoms for beyond pelvic pain, which in hindsight, looking back at that, I just didn't have some of the other symptoms that would show that I had an infection. But I was taking antibiotics because I really wanted to get out of pain. I had felt like possibly my symptoms had, started and gotten more intense with an IUD. So I thought, okay, I'm going to keep taking these antibiotics. On the second round of antibiotics, I was prescribed them, but I just decided not to pick them up because I did not feel, really, my own intuition was telling me that this was not the issue, because the first round had done nothing to improve my symptoms, and it was the same doctor just doing another prescription. So I kind of had basic level testing, discussions, prescriptions, that didn't solve my issues or really even identify what my diagnosis really was. It was definitely a kind of whack-a-mole of ways to treat things. So
Mm-hmm.
that's how I describe my experience.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's a common story, unfortunately. It sounds like they didn't even know that you had an infection. They were just guessing based on a symptom and then giving you an antibiotic. Like they didn't test, maybe do like a vaginal swab and see if there was an infection, anything like that. They're just
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I had exams. It's it's possible. It's been a few years. There may have been a swab. I don't specifically remember that. But
Mhm.
yes, it was never that there was clearly an infection that needed to be treated. It
Yeah.
was, this is our best guess.
Mhm.
Um, so let's just try and solve it with this.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's kind of like, A, they're not really listening to you that well as far as how your symptoms are. And I feel you on that, because when I was diagnosed with a fibroid, it was like, oh, well, we don't do anything until you start to have a lot of symptoms, you know?
Right.
So it's like, oh, you have to be, falling over, for us to do any sort of intervention. And even then, it's not really going to address, the cause.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about the symptoms, as far as like, how were they affecting your life?
So they were affecting my life at random times, which became extremely frustrating. Many times with endometriosis, you tend to have very painful periods, or it's viewed in that way, that you have heavy, painful periods. That is true, I think, for some. Generally, my experience with endometriosis has been that it affected all aspects of my life, regardless if I was on my period or not. I had extremely um, painful pelvic, issues and bloating randomly anytime during the month. So my symptoms started, I would say, with random pelvic pain. I remember specifically being on the phone with someone um, in my car in the grocery store parking lot, just having a conversation. And I had a random kind of bout of pelvic pain where I had to hang up the phone. That was really at the beginning when I knew things were wrong, but expressing that to a doctor doesn't
Mhm.
show, I don't have anything to show for that. I just have my own experience. So that didn't lead to anything, but yeah, I was having random pelvic pain. And then as things progressed, I felt also like I was having urgency and frequency with urination, which is just it kind of falls into the endometriosis bucket. At the time, I didn't know that. Um, and then as time went on, I felt like my periods were changing. I was also changing my birth control, thinking that that was going to help the issue or was possibly the cause. So I got my IUD out. I was trying other forms. And so I felt like my period was a bit inconsistent. That maybe explained why my periods were heavier or lighter. I had inconsistency, but eventually settled into a heavier period, unlike anything I had had, in my 25
Mhm.
in my life since before my period. So I did not normally have heavy periods. I had pretty light periods. But then they got heavier, longer, and very intense pain. So eventually, the pain was really the driving factor behind eventually seeking surgery. So my periods just became my cramps before, leading up to my period, and during my period were um, unbelievably, excruciatingly painful. I would take off work or I would have to change my life in order to manage that pain. I eventually considered um, having to manage my pain with drugs like Percocet, which would then preclude me from, really being present at work or driving. So it got when it got to that point, I started seeking um, like a surgical option and looking further into understanding and diagnosing myself and having a doctor diagnose me with endometriosis.
Yeah. Yeah, tell us a little bit about the surgery and kind of what that was like and just the result of that.
Yeah, so I decided to see a different doctor, from different from the one who had been prescribing me antibiotics. I decided to see and just switch. And at that point, I kind of knew that I had endometriosis, or that it felt like all of my symptoms um, led to that. So I had a meeting with a new doctor, an appointment with a new doctor. I went in, kind of sat down and said, I think I have endometriosis and I'm here, to consider treatment. Um, Hopefully excision surgery, which is generally the best standard of care for endometriosis. So um, I talked to him about that. That happened very quickly. I He agreed generally, looking at my symptoms, and I had a couple of ultrasounds. Ultrasounds don't diagnose endometriosis. The only way to diagnose the disease is through surgery, laparoscopic surgery, and getting your tissue then tested. So I was 99% sure that that's what I had, but had to have surgery in order to do that. So I um, I had the surgery. I definitely had I had some skepticism. It's difficult with endometriosis to have really great excision surgery. There's only a handful of surgeons and OBs who can perform that surgery. And women tend to fly all over the country and all over the world trying to find an excision specialist based on, you know, their symptoms or what the progression of their endometriosis is. So I considered doing that. But I think a little bit of self-doubt kind of creeped in, and I thought maybe I don't have endometriosis at all. I probably shouldn't fly halfway across the country to have a surgery that might not lead to that. I'll just do this right now, you know, here locally. And I was also keen to make progress. So yeah, I kind of went the route that was closest and most local to me to get an excision surgery here in Salt Lake City, and where I was officially diagnosed, which it was mixed feelings. It was a lot of validation, and then I had always, you know, and then also a lot of sadness that was, you know, the thing that I was facing and kind of all the years that had been lost looking for answers. So I had that surgery. It's fairly straightforward. It's outpatient. And yeah, I received an official diagnosis and was hoping that that surgery would lead to a huge reduction in pain and a huge reduction in my symptoms, specifically, you know, bloating and just general malaise and, you know, loss of energy. I was really hoping that that was going to make me, you know, 90% better.
And did it?
Yeah. So I had my surgery, and I will say, and I think a lot of people with endometriosis experience this, that after surgery, you do feel different. You immediately feel a difference. If you have excision, there's a couple different ways to remove endometriosis. Excision is the best way to do that. But I did not feel like after 6 months post-surgery that my pain and my day-to-day discomfort was hugely reduced. The first few months I thought were better. But as time went on, at that 6-month mark, I really felt like I did not have an improvement that equaled, you know, the input of getting excision surgery. And I did not see an excision specialist. So that was something I had also thought about. I wanted to possibly consider surgery again. So when I started having those thoughts, I was just thinking, I need to take this even more into my own hands than I already had. Because the idea of just hopping from surgeon to surgeon, trying to get pain relief, was really not a future that I wanted. A common thing that happens with women who have endometriosis is they are at times told that pregnancy can resolve their symptoms. And I was told that in my journey after my first excision surgery, that I should consider getting pregnant or pursuing pregnancy as a form of treatment for endometriosis. And that was a very big wake-up call for me, because I did not want to pursue pregnancy to treat my illness. That is not, in my mind, how I wanted to become pregnant. So I really had a wake-up call when I had that discussion with a doctor following my first, my only excision surgery.
Yeah, not the best reason to bring a baby into this world.
Yeah.
To help with symptoms.
Right.
Sure. So tell us kind of about your journey to finding something more holistic.
Yeah, so I started looking for more support groups. I wanted to talk to more women with endometriosis. I had an idea or a thought that sometimes my what I ate could impact my symptoms. I mean, generally with your pelvis and stomach, it's like all, mixed
Mm,
in. You feel like, oh, is it what I'm eating? Could I treat this in a different way? I knew I had endometriosis. That was totally confirmed. But I was learning a little bit more, I was scratching the surface of understanding how lifestyle post surgery could help your symptoms. So I, at the time, had put a second surgery on hold, and I just wanted to kind of um, let my surgery that I had had lie and try and just help my symptoms generally. I don't think I was out to cure my endometriosis, but just see, all right, should I make some lifestyle changes um, to help how I feel? And so I was exploring that, but I was actually pretty discouraged. I, on my own, would do like a 1 week um, eating or like dietary regimen that I didn't feel like helped. I tried fasting because I knew I was always feeling sick to my stomach, feeling extremely bloated. So I tried, not eating to see if that would help my symptoms, and that was, um, I would say, kind of like a secondary low point. There was definitely the low point in considering pregnancy as a
mhm.
way to help my symptoms. But after that, as I was exploring other avenues, I would say I had a secondary low point in where I felt like I had fasted for nearly 2 days and was still extremely bloated and felt sick. I was so frustrated that I had eaten nothing
Yeah.
and still felt unwell. So that was hard. I had kind of jumped into Facebook groups or kind of online communities that were doing challenges or making, turmeric lattes and things like that, trying to implement kind of a anti-inflammatory diet. So I was dabbling, but not really taking it seriously or doing a real kind of systematic approach. And I was expressing all of this at the time to my sister, who is a dietitian. And I was just talking about my frustrations, mainly around the fasting. And she recommended and had seen you. So she told me, hey, like, you should check this out. These are programs. This is actually truly an approach that um, has a holistic, plan, and isn't a, 1 week, 7 day, or 48-hour approach. And you should look into something that is a bit more structured for you, that covers your full, the full you, and also your hormonal health, which was really kind of the first time I had been introduced to that concept. So at her encouraging words kind of brought me um, out of the dabbling, kind of scratching the surface approach to lifestyle changes and to you.
Well, I thank her. I haven't met her, but I thank her. Well, I think that's really powerful there. You kind of mentioned scratching the surface, you mentioned dabbling, and it's something we see a lot, and there's nothing wrong with starting to make changes on your own, maybe doing a more anti-inflammatory diet, that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, health in general needs to be a whole systemic approach. We always talk about how everything's connected. And with essentially endometriosis, a lot of practitioners in the holistic field consider it autoimmune. I think that's still a little bit controversial, but
Hmm.
there's actually some studies out now too about, basically addressing gut bacteria and how it has helped, endometriosis symptoms and that kind of thing, right?
Hmm.
And when it comes to autoimmune, most of your immune system is in your gut. So we want to make sure we're addressing that. And the connection between your bloating, right, that you were experiencing. And sometimes I think people will think, oh, well, the bloating just has to do with endometriosis, and aren't really considering that maybe there is something going deeper, on with
Hmm.
the digestive tract. But right, in our 6-month program, we do so much. We obviously did a GI map, and we found quite a few things to work on, right? I don't,
Yep.
if you want to share, that's that's totally fine.
Yeah.
Um, and minerals, obviously we look at minerals, we look at heavy metals, and we looked at your hormones.
Yep.
But tell us a little bit about going through the program and kind of your like what drove you to go ahead and decide to do the program. Tell us a little bit. Did you have any kind of fears or reservations going into it? How did you overcome that? And then maybe talk a little bit about your journey, through the last 6 months.
Yeah. I don't know if I would have, been able to commit to the program if I had not experienced some of the challenges that I mentioned, right? Which was the advice of, you know, doctors to consider pregnancy as a way to treat symptoms. If I had not, explored some of my own changes that were here and there and not, really fully committed or or backed up by any one plan or by information about me as a person. I was just I was grasping at anything because I was so desperate to
Mhm.
find relief um, after going through a surgery, which is not an easy thing to do, and
Mhm.
then really not experiencing the changes and the relief that I wanted. So I drew upon those experiences, having gone what I would consider maybe the more traditional route. There are routes within endometriosis that are um, a lot worse. So I do feel that, the average diagnosis, time for women, it can be 7 to 8 years. Mine was 3. So like I've had some parts of my journey that were not as difficult as others, but I I really needed that relief. I was just so incredibly unhappy with the answers I had received before. So I was highly motivated
Mhm.
to find a way that actually solved the problems that sat well with me. Pregnancy was not going to work, and I knew that not taking a real systematic and holistic approach to dietary changes or lifestyle changes or just my overall health wasn't working. So I pulled upon those low points to pursue another option. I did not want to consider surgery again 6 months after. I mean, it hurt to think about that. It hurt emotionally, it hurt physically. Like um I was just not wanting to do that again to my body and to myself. So um I I was at a place of desperation and exasperation. I don't know if I came into the program or looking at making these changes with the thought that I had finally, arrived to the solution. I definitely felt skeptical from a sense that I had been skeptical my entire experience with endometriosis, or that I had to be, that I really had
Yeah.
to lower my expectations, which is kind of what I feel like women generally with their health, I would say especially endometriosis, but are kind of conditioned to do over time, is to live with pain and to tolerate things that don't work. And so I had a little bit of that mentality going in with the sincere hope that it would. but with really low expectations that it could. So I just felt like I needed to explore every avenue to avoid undergoing surgery or getting to the point where I would actually consider pregnancy as a form of treatment. So um, I really wanted to it. I wanted to explore healing myself from the inside out. I had felt previously that a lot of my approaches, or the approaches that I had been prescribed by different doctors, was all about outside in. Let's prescribe you, an antibiotic. Let's go a surgical route. Never was I feeling like people could tell me what was going on inside, what was causing these issues. It was all about treating the symptoms. And so I was really intrigued by your approach of, let's get to the fundamental healing that is needed within, and explore that. And that's what I felt like I needed. The external, outside in approaches weren't working. And so that drove me and really intrigued me with the program. And I wanted to give that a shot. I wanted to give myself that shot on that approach. So yeah, the feelings I had about it, though, were a bit fearful. I was coming from a place, though, where I felt like so much of what I had done had not worked. So I totally understand that mentality and that perspective. It can be one of fear, because you feel like you have done everything. You have checked into a hospital to have, a surgery, and you've met with strangers and had to be poked and prodded and examined so many times that you don't really have a ton of energy left. So that was the point that I was at. I think people could definitely, come at it from a place of being, highly motivated to finally get somewhere that's that feels right. But it felt right. I wanted to take that approach, but I was definitely hurting. I definitely had fear. I definitely had skepticism. But I felt like this was something I had to pursue because I had pretty much exhausted my other avenues.
Yeah, and this true. I think a lot of people feel like they have to be 100% ready, 100%, whatever, in order to take these types of action steps. But I always say, like, the pain of staying where you are is greater than kind of the fear that you have of taking those steps.
Mm-hmm.
That's when it's time to change.
Yeah.
And that's the case where you kind of know that even if you don't necessarily feel ready, you're at least willing to try.
Yes.
Right. So maybe briefly talk about just kind of your experience going through the program. Like, how do you feel it was maybe different than what you've tried so far? What do you think
Sure.
kind of helped it be a success for you?
Yeah. So going through the program, I mean, it took a lot for me to view myself in a different way. I feel I was definitely conditioned in my life, and especially, in the first few years of trying to understand what was wrong with me and what endometriosis was, to not accept this type of approach. So I think I had a little bit of resistance
Mhm.
within me to view myself differently, to give myself more compassion, to give myself time. I think time was a really interesting thing for me. I think I expressed and felt after, going through my protocols, that I don't know if I was progressing. I was concerned about that. But I think it was a really long, you know, mental shift that I needed to make,
Mhm.
that this was not going to resolve my issues in 6 weeks. So my feelings of going through the program were, I definitely felt like seeing it as a full like reset and not a treatment and not an external thing. That was a difficult shift for me. It did not happen immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but going through it taught me to look at many aspects of my life, all aspects of my life, and understand where I could give myself more. How could I give myself more rest? How could I give myself more care? Um, and that transformation mentally, I think, was really important to happen in addition to the physical healing that I was going through. It's asking a lot of yourself. And it was difficult for me. And I think I struggled in some areas that honestly, looking back, or people might see as were very easy, easy areas, but it's difficult to view yourself as a person that can heal when you've been conditioned, to be fixed, to be fixed quickly, to be fixed with, surgery or a prescription. That's not what the program is about. It's about looking at all the aspects of your life and of your health and making, conscious changes step by step, slowly over time. Um, and that's what I felt like I was taught, and that I'm still learning. I think a very important metaphor that was shared with me was the idea of stairs. So trying to leap from the bottom of a staircase to the very top is a very difficult thing to do. But in different ways, not just in, I would say kind of the medical world, but all over, we're taught that that's a great thing to do. To jump from the bottom to the top is great, whether that's, in work or relationships or health, getting to that spot as quickly as possible is generally what we want to pursue. And I really had to slow down and celebrate the victories of one step at a time. I think this is a metaphor that Paula shared with me.
Mm-hmm. Yep, she's
Um,
good at metaphors.
yeah, it was just, that has stuck with me, understanding that going through the program is a series of small steps that will lead you to a much better place. But there is a transformation that has to happen to accept those steps as progress and good things, that the pace is a good thing. And that has really, really only been a very recent realization for me, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when I heard that at first, it really resonated with me, but I didn't know if it was something I could immediately,
Mm-hmm.
apply to my thinking and the way that I saw everything. But the process really showed me how to make progress in many small areas, to have many small goals, and not try to feel 100% better in a matter of weeks or months. So,
Mm-hmm. Well said, Darrian. Well said, for sure. That is, an amazing realization to have. And I think that's what keeps people stuck a lot, right? Is that, they don't necessarily give things enough time, but the mindset shift is a huge part of healing,
mm-hmm.
right? And that's the toughest, right? And I think that's really where working with someone that can help kind of support you through those thought shifts can be really, really helpful. So that's awesome to hear.
Yeah.
So tell us how you are today. How are your symptoms today? How are they different than they were? How is your life different now than it was when
Yeah.
you first started?
Yeah. So it's interesting, the process of going through healing. I definitely had some points in that process where I felt that I wasn't healing quickly enough, where and looking back at, I wish I could go back even now, this is only a few months ago, but tell myself that even though, some time had passed, things were going to get better. I do think there is sometimes a feeling of that you actually can feel a little bit worse, not maybe necessarily physically, but you feel worse because you have been putting in effort and you have been putting in, and implementing changes, and you haven't felt like you're seeing like huge progress, and you can really feel discouraged. I know I did, because
Mhm.
it felt like um you start telling yourself very, difficult stories that you will not be able to get better. This is another thing that like is not going to work for you, and you start feeling really sorry for yourself. So I want to acknowledge to that moment for people, and if people experience that, that is a thing that is okay. It may not happen, and if it does, it's you can still progress, and still, you will feel better, because you've been told, and maybe are holding on to feelings that things should be happening at a certain pace. But that's just an important thing that, that happened, where I felt worse emotionally, because I felt like my issues hadn't magically resolved after, 60 days.
Mhm.
um and that I'm glad that I pushed through so that I could arrive here, which is uh, the the daily hurt, the daily pain that I was experiencing, pelvic pain, especially bloating, the discomfort um, that I used to feel every day is hugely reduced and practically gone. I um, I honestly feel like a different person, even just sitting here. So sitting was uncomfortable. Every little
Mhm.
aspect of your life is impacted. Um, I couldn't wear certain clothes. I couldn't wear certain jeans. I couldn't wear, certain waistbands, just because they would make me so uncomfortable, or I never knew what was going to be coming that day with my symptoms. That's not something that I think about anymore. That's a mental burden that's been lifted from me. That is so amazing. And I love it. It just makes me really happy to not feel the issues that I have just kind of hurting me from the inside out. It was just it physically, you know, it's a really difficult disease, and mentally also. And I think I'm now realizing that there was a huge, huge mental burden. Um, but yeah, I day to day, my symptoms, I don't have the debilitating pelvic pain. Um, I, yeah, hugely reduced on bloating. I mean, those two, I mean, they feel kind of synonymous, the pain and the bloating, because it was so frequent. It was 3 weeks out of the month, if not more, that I don't feel that way anymore. And that is so wonderful. It's just changed, how I approach things every day. I changed the way that I dress. Like I didn't really realize that at the time, but um, or the nature with which I sit down. Like it's been, hugely different in ways that I didn't always imagine. Um, and I also feel like I see myself differently. And that's a feeling that kind of sits with you when you wake up in the morning, or you go to bed at night, or you make certain choices throughout the day, that you're thinking about yourself. That's not something I was very good at doing. I um I didn't think about what was going to be good for me, what was going to, nourish me or heal me or feed me. I was just kind of go, go, go all the time, trying to look for the next fix for my disease. And I see myself differently now, and kind of on this new round of um, things that I'm doing, the protocols that I'm on. Like the shift is so hugely different. I can't really describe it in any other way, but um, just massive change. In my first protocol, um, I needed a lot of help and assistance from my husband to even put that together, to order things, to do my tests, because I was in such a like I was in a really low kind of mental and physical space. I needed help. Um, I was really having a hard time like committing and being present. I honestly wasn't used to taking care of myself. It was so foreign that I needed help to do really simple things for myself.
Mhm.
And now that changed today with some things I'm doing now, or things that I want to try, or um, things that I'm ordering. Like I do it all myself. I'm excited. I'm putting my plans together. I'm looking at my schedule. I'm putting in time for me. That was not something I could honestly do by myself 6 months ago. So uh, it's definitely been a really big change. My periods themselves are improved. My pain is hugely improved, and the duration of my pain. I feel like I still have um, intense pain. I'd say probably more intense than the average woman who does not have endometriosis,
Mhm.
but I'm getting a lot better and my periods are a lot lighter. So um, those are all improvements in those areas. And I don't feel like, I mean, I was going to say 75%, but it was probably closer to 90, 95 looking back of my month is not spent hurting. And it's so great. I don't even know if 10% of my month is spent hurting. It's so much different now. So um, it's it's really impacted me physically, which is wonderful, which was kind of was my initial thinking of the point, but mentally I'm so much better and so much lighter in a way that I didn't anticipate, and that has been really good for me.
That is awesome. That Nothing makes me happier. Nothing makes me prouder though, because we can tell people what to do all day long, but they ultimately have to go off and do it, right? And change
Right.
the thought process and stop making excuses for themselves and put in the effort, right? And I always say reward yourself for even just the effort, not
Yeah.
necessarily like the results, because like you said, results may not come right away. But
Right.
celebrating your effort, celebrating taking one step at a time, and ultimately not giving up. you know
Yeah.
it's like 70% of a program working is ultimately one that you believe in. So if you don't
Hmm.
believe it's going to work, you're not going to do the things. And of course, you're not going to see those changes. So
Yeah.
that is awesome to hear. So,
Thanks.
kind of last question here. If you were to go back and talk to your younger self, or maybe you were to talk to someone that were kind of in your shoes, who's thinking, you know, you thought where, oh, am I going to have to live like this forever? Is this all it's going to be? Oh, I don't know if I want something to work. Is it going to be worth it? What would you say to that person?
Sure. So I would want to tell myself that your condition and your illness is not everything about you. Over time, I kind of started to believe that endometriosis led to all of my issues, which I think it plays a large part, but I was unwilling to kind of look at myself as a whole being and look at my health um, in a holistic way, because I was too focused maybe on just wanting to treat endometriosis and being very specific with how I applied my treatment. And that is a huge learning for me, is that I wasn't necessarily um, here to just solve for endometriosis. And I think that was an interesting part looking back at the very kind of maybe initial conversations that we had. I remember being extremely focused on endometriosis. I only want to treat endometriosis. I want to understand what experience there had been with endometriosis. Was there other endometriosis people? That that was the way you're kind of conditioned to look at your health. You're trying to just solve the one issue that you can identify. And I would tell myself that this might sound a little bit counterintuitive, but this is not just about endometriosis. This is
Mhm.
about you as a person. This is about your health um, overall, and resolving and working on that is going to help this one issue, endometriosis, and a myriad of other issues, and teach you how to think differently and see yourself differently. And it's not just about that one disease or the one thing that you know that you have. Um, I don't think I don't know if I could receive that message
Mhm.
um, at the beginning. I just remember being laser focused on wanting to solve this one kind of disorder. Um, and I'm I would tell myself that, yeah, you're going to have to change the way that you think and the way that you view yourself, and you're going to have to believe that you are worthy to heal. And that's not a concept I feel like we're really told. Is we're kind of we're kind of just given whatever we can get, like I said, whatever prescription, whatever, you know, path forward, whether that's surgical or, what have you. That it's not really about seeing yourself as a human that can heal over time with work and effort. We're kind of just looking for that quick solution. And being you play a part in your own healing in the program. And that's what I would want to tell myself. Is the program is not here to fix you. The program is not here to make you better. You need to be here to make you better. You need to show up to make the healing possible. This is a difficult thing, I think, for people to hear when you've suffered and not been listened to, and you've been ignored or, misdiagnosed. It's hard to want to tell people that they need to step up and show up for themselves, but it's the only way that the program is going to work. And you will have ups and downs, you will have lows. You will also end up on the other side with, the high of feeling like you have your health back, that you're playing a role in your health, which I feel like had been stripped away from me in my years trying to understand my diagnosis, and understand endometriosis, and find out what was wrong with me. That had really been taken from me. And so um, I would tell myself that, yeah, you have a role to play, that you need to show up. It's going to be hard. Um, but in the end, the reward will be worth it. And you won't be 100% fixed in, 30 days, 90 days, the 6 months.
Mhm.
That I'm so excited that the journey has brought me here, and that the path continues forward, um, with me playing a role in it in a way that I had not, you know, been playing before. So
That is awesome. That is awesome. Every time I hear your story, you bring me to tears because it's just like a proud mother, you know. And I know Paula and I, you work with both Paula and I through this journey. So, I thank Paula too
yeah,
for her role in helping to support you as well. But awesome. Well, we really appreciate you sharing your story. I think it's so important for women to speak up about these things, instead of suffering in silence. Because I know so many women who ultimately are almost either afraid or ashamed, or they're, maybe people in their lives don't really understand. I know so many women who, like, maybe their spouses even, or their, family, mother, sister, are like, why would you want to do holistic? Like, that's, oh, hoo-ha, that doesn't do anything. Just go to your doctor, just take the birth control, just, do the surgery, whatever. And so, they don't always have that support. And support is such an important part of the journey, no matter who you get it from. So I appreciate that. Anything else? Any other last minute thoughts that you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to touch on that idea of support. I definitely had, I had some really great support. I definitely experienced some um, detraction, I guess you could say,
Mhm.
and that's really hard. So I think it's important to keep in mind that at times when people question your approach or doing this program, that it's because they want the best for you as quickly as possible. They have kind of the same things that you will
Mhm.
unlearn, which is um, that healing comes from the outside in, that there is a pill for that, that this should be the quickest way to do something, or the way most easily covered by insurance. Like they have all that same, all those same beliefs. And, um, and so they're doing it out of concern. Um, but I would understand that the greatest way to overcome that concern is to pursue the results and to get the results that you have, um, and and to keep that in mind, because I definitely experienced that. So I have a thought on just I had varying levels of support in my life from people close to me. So I know how that goes, and to pursue yourself, regardless of what people say. And then, I mean, I would want to tell women that it's your experience of not being heard is extremely common. It's too common. Um, and and that there is a totally different world, um, for your health than what you have probably traditionally experienced. And I've been there, and I just want to be here on the other side to anyone that's thinking about stepping into that world, to tell them that I know it's really scary, it's really painful, um, but that, yeah, if you can count on yourself, to make a change, there is some really great things on the other end. And that's coming from someone who felt like had tried it all,
Mhm.
was a skeptic, was discouraged, and I would just really say a little difficult.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, it's an invitation to see things differently, to look at things differently, and to understand that your disease is not an isolated issue in a certain part of your body, um, that your health, you know, is an inside out thing, and to take the leap, take the jump, give it a test, experiment, um, because what I'm experiencing on the other side is wonderful, and just living without daily pain, um, is how life should be, and that it's possible for you.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. Couldn't say it myself, so we'll just leave it there.
Yeah.
Well, Darren, I really appreciate you being willing to jump on here, and hopefully we can help support more women by sharing your story. So
Yes.
I appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.